what is left to explore? With the tallest peaks climbed, the depths of our ocean reached and the planet mapped, it is a seemingly valid question. But even in 2018, our opportunities for exploration are endless. For instance, we know more about Mars than what lies beneath our oceans. Ecosystems are changing faster than we understand them. And indigenous cultures are disappearing before their knowledge is shared. Exploration is no longer just about, planting your nation's flag in an uncharted territory or being the first to summit the world's tallest mountains. While these accomplishments are iconic, they're now part of a larger fabric of exploration. Today, exploration is about increasing our knowledge and understanding of the world we live in, and then bringing that knowledge back to our own communities to help forge a more sustainable future. For me, being an explorer often means working with some of the world's most remote communities to improve environmental health outcomes. And in my time working and living with these remote communities, I've found that we all face the same challenges, food, water, shelter, love. Yet, given these common challenges, the range of cultural adaptation is absolutely extraordinary. As a young girl, I devoured articles in National Geographic about deforestation of the Amazon and tribes disappearing at alarming rates, and I remember feeling this immense sense of urgency, along with the realization that, I could be a part of one of the last generations to live in a world where, places on the cover of National Geographic even existed. So I knew pretty early on that if I wanted to see these places, I was going to have to act fast. So at an unusually young age, I set off to work in places that others had written off as too remote, too wet, or too dangerous. So this evening, I'll be giving you guys a look at one of my recent Explorers Club flag expeditions in Vanuatu. These expeditions, they're filled with such unfathomable beauty. Sometimes they almost seem more like fiction than fact. Lost tribes, magic spells, dances that last days on end. But first, let's backtrack to 2013. I sailed across the Pacific Ocean and became absolutely mesmerized by Melanesian culture. Now, when I got back to the US, I heard rumors at the Explorers Club headquarters in New York about this potential cluster of female chiefs residing on the remote northern island of Maéwo in the Republic of Vanuatu. Now, for more than 100 years, all the literature claimed that there were no female chiefs in Vanuatu. So when the opportunity arose to join an Explorers Club flag expedition to document this potential anthropological anomaly, I was ecstatic. So the key goals of the expedition were first to locate these presumed female chiefs, and then if we found them, to document their practices, powers, jurisdiction, any traditional song and dance, and then finally, spoiler alert here a little bit, at what became the female chief's request, to compile evidence as to whether or not the females could join the male-exclusive National Council of Chiefs, which is sort of, from my understanding of your government here, like your parliament. So, when I give this presentation in the US, this is generally the point where I have to explain what, where, or who is this Vanuatu. Almost no one over there has heard of it. It's the craziest thing. In fact, when I call my American bank to put a travel alert on my accounts, Vanuatu doesn't even come up listed as a country that you can go to have a financial concern about. So, but as you all would know, Vanuatu is in fact a real country. It's an archipelago with over 80 islands, less than 300,000 residents, and over 100 Melanesian dialects are spoken. So parallel to this language diversity is a diversity of culture. So this evening we'll be focusing on Maéwo Island, which is this long, skinny one right there. Unlike a lot of islands in the South Pacific and within Vanuatu, it wasn't entirely plagued by blackbirding, Christianity, or colonialism. In fact, the island was even geographically lost for a little while. Excuse me, I sound like a dead goat tonight. And I mean that literally. The island, early explorers wrote down the wrong coordinates for the island, and then when colonists came back, it wasn't where it was supposed to be, and the Sydney Morning Herald actually published a newspaper titled that this island had gone missing. So Maéwo Island is the homeland of approximately 3,000 people, and a branch of human imagination going back to the beginning of time. So they also have this graded society, meaning that individuals rise in status and authority by performing a series of ceremonies to acquire knowledge, sort of like going to university, although this requires a lot more pig killing than when I went to university. And the island is also matrilineal, meaning that lineage, birthright, and social status are all traced on the mother's side. So, to kick off this expedition, against my better judgment, I hopped on this totally MacGyvered 1950s twin otter plane, where we actually had to practice the braced position as part of our safety briefing. And I was sitting there, I had the Member of Parliament from Maéwo to my right, a flock of chickens to my left, and had no idea what I was about to get myself into. But when we finally arrived in those first few days on the island, we thought, perhaps the rumors of female chiefs were unfounded, because all the women we were talking to didn't really identify with the Western term chief. Now, all these Vanuatu female leaders much preferred the term notari, which loosely translates to female custom leader or chief. Now, this was all a little perplexing to me, considering that they had undergone an initiation ceremony that was almost identical to that of the male chiefs. So we did document that there were 6 levels of notari. Only knowledge of the 3 lowest levels was currently in use because the top 3 had passed on with elders. And about 25% of all women on Maéwo are this rockin' notari. There were only 6 at the 2nd level and 1 sort of paramount female chief, if you will. And to get this status, the women had to go through an initiation ceremony and possess knowledge of traditional history, weaving of mats, all sorts of magic, pretty much every ceremony on the books, and the linguasana ritual, which I was fascinated by. It's basically 10 days that these women spend in what they call a tambu house, and they can't move, they can't eat by themselves, they can't walk out to the latrine, and this all culminates in the killing of a sacred pig. Amidst all of these terminology differences, we did find 4 women that identified with both the terms notari and chief. Needless to say, we interviewed them extensively. And these interviews revealed that connotation differences between chief and notari really came down to a translation issue, because the women felt like the powers that they held were just lost in translation when the term was oversimplified to chief. But since, there is no exact translation in English, chief is the most appropriate term, particularly if the women wanted to be a part of the National Council of Chiefs. This expedition, we were able to document, basically, that these women could in fact join, and it all culminated in a meeting with the National Council of Chiefs, who revealed that in the future it would be possible for the women to join the National Council with all of the same rights and jurisdiction as the men. I was back in Vanuatu in December. Unfortunately, no women had been brought forward by the area council yet, but at least there is still a very much heated dialogue in place. So I really see this as, my team and I, we helped rewrite anthropological history in the Pacific, and by doing so, we provided the documentation for the women to assert themselves within their own government. And this really illustrated to me that exploration today is still as important as it was 200 years ago. Because there's still so much we don't know and can continue to learn about our spellbinding world. So that's their Parliament building, the National Council of Chiefs. In my quest to explore, I often find myself alone in places with, concerning histories of cannibalism, violence against women, and most tropical and neglected diseases found under the sun. But it can be both exhilarating and cosmically terrifying. But I feel like if we stay within the comforts of our own communities, within the confines of our own ideologies, we stand to lose so much. So nerves be damned, I persist. And after all, isn't that part of what exploration is all about? The unknown, the act of, exploring something about the unfamiliar, even if it means being exposed to risks or the extremes. My time exploring encourages me to embrace risk and really discover belief systems profoundly different from my own. So while some of these indigenous belief systems may seem peculiar, First off, it's not for us to judge. And secondly, there's so much we can learn by putting our beliefs aside to listen and learn from these communities before they disappear. During my months in Vanuatu, I became completely embedded in the lives of the female chiefs and personally learned from a lot of the island's many cultural traditions. So what follows are what I consider to be some of the most intriguing observations and cultural practices within the Vanuatu communities. So first off is traditional economies. A lot of you might be wondering why I have this big bone around me. So the livelihood in many parts of Vanuatu is very much based on a barter economy, which is supplemented by traditional economies. So anything from strings of seashells, woven mats, to pig tusks, and sort of like here in Australia where you might go to deposit a check at the bank. In certain communities in Vanuatu, you would go to deposit your string of seashells or your pig tusk, like the one I'm wearing. Now, this practice might seem outdated, even unapplicable in our trillion-dollar cash economy, but is it? I mean, let's consider what happened during the global financial crisis in Greece. Essentially, lack of trust in banks led people to try and withdraw their money really fast, only to find that their money wasn't there. Perhaps our banks can learn a thing or two from this, not so archaic system. The next step is weaving. The weaving of mats plays a really important role in the Vanuatu culture and economy and is sort of the keystone to the women's lives there. One woman told me, without our mats and our pig tusks, we are nothing. So pretty much every ceremony necessitates the exchange of mats, and the designs are beautiful, but they're more than just art. So these ones on the left there, every single one of those designs means something different. So sometimes it's sort of like almost wearing your CV on your shirt. So my blouse right there on the right, that basically says "She who can create taro." So magic also plays a really important role within the Natari, and it's commonly held that the highest ranking female chiefs possess black and white magic powers. Magic is used to describe everything from the death of a child, unexpected sickness, the ability to bring water atop a mountain, so tsunamis, even instant disappearing acts. And I was a little scared, like if I asked too many questions that they didn't want to answer, they might try and make me instantly disappear. Didn't happen, but part of my research was also to examine the role of female chiefs in the north, so in Maéwo, to that of female leaders in other parts of the archipelago. So this brought me to Tanna Island, which is down further south. It's a pretty popular tourist destination, so some of you might have been there. There I discovered Prince Philip tribe. Basically this brought about a pretty profound shift in my own cultural beliefs after my experiences there. So the 1,600 members of the Prince Philip tribe believe that upon the Duke of Edinburgh's death, he will magically reappear on Tanna Island as a healthy Melanesian man. Naturally. And upon his return, there's a young Tawnyese girl that was waiting for his emergence to marry him. So my goal was to track down this girl, interview, study her role in society, compare that to the women in the north, and so I spent countless months researching her, learning her language. I really put a lot into this. So you can imagine my surprise when I found out the woman that I had spent countless months researching was a spirit in a rock. Interviews proved to be a little one-sided. And initially, I was disappointed, more like absolutely heartbroken by all of this. I set out to find this woman that was going to marry the reincarnated Prince Philip, and I was going to share her story, and all I found was a rock. It's pretty bad. But I had told so many people about what I had set out to do and was mortified at the idea of going back to the US and telling people I found a rock. But this was a really important reality check because often in exploration we find things that don't fit comfortably within our own worldview, and that's just as important. So while this can be, confusing and challenging and lead to a lot of sleepless nights grappling with how do I include this in my Explorers Globe flag report, it doesn't make this belief any less valid than one that you and I readily understand. So while I will probably never understand how a rock can marry a reincarnated Prince Philip, it doesn't make this belief any less valid than one that I readily get. So, In our rapidly globalizing world, it may seem like these traditional communities are somehow leftovers of a past era, but really, nothing could be further from the truth. They are modern men and women defending their unique way of life and proving that there are other ways of interacting with the earth. However, these unique ways of life are under threat by forces beyond communities' adaptive capacities. Globalization and climate change pose threats to our global diversity of culture. The people of Vanuatu are famous for their tradition of sand drawing. This tradition developed as sort of a method of communication between communities in a region with over 115 different language groups. So sand drawings are made in the ground, and the drawer uses one finger to trace this continuous line that ends up creating this beautiful and mysterious design. But they're more than designs, as you probably guessed. They transmit mythology, farming patterns, dance choreography. They can also be used like a text message or a note. So, say you went to visit your neighbor, they weren't home, you crank out a little sand drawing by their front hut entry to say, "Hey Bob, stop by to say hi, hope all's well with you and the fam." But globalization is now affecting even these remote corners of Vanuatu, where, every community, of course, should have access to Vanuatu's continually expanding telephone network, but it has meant that many youngsters are more interested in learning how to text in the national language of Bishtama than learning the sand drawings in their island language. So, it seems we aren't the only ones worried about our youngsters getting glued to technology. But globalization is not the only factor exerting a time pressure on exploration. The effect of climate change also poses a threat to our global diversity of cultures. In the village of Narovarovo, access to clean drinking water used to be found in a spring. A mere 5-minute walk from the village, women would walk to the spring to collect drinking water and engage in the practice of water music. Sorry, I get way too excited about water music. Remember that spring I mentioned that was a 5-minute walk from the village? Well, it's dried up after years of unprecedented drought. Now the women must walk 30 minutes each way to collect drinking water. It's a strenuous walk deep in the jungle, and by the time the women get to the new natural spring, they're tired and tight on time, which has resulted in a decline in the amount of water music being practiced. And it may not seem like a big deal that these women on a tiny island in the middle of the Pacific are splashing in the water less. It is a threat to our ethnosphere and our cultural survival. Besides, how boring would it be if we were all one homogeneous culture glued to our smartphones? So sadly, these cultural effects of climate change are not limited to this cluster of islands in the Pacific. It's a worldwide phenomenon that I've observed with sand communities in Namibia, off the coast of Panama with the Kuna, and when not being chased by crocodiles on the banks of the Olahai in Madagascar. Astounded and inspired by these cultural effects of climate change, I have launched Water Around the World, which is 1 boat, 3 oceans, 5 water projects. It's a global climate circumnavigation. And at the end of this year, we'll be doing our proof of concept in Vanuatu, where we'll be working with communities in the northernmost islands to basically, climate change is undermining their capacity to inhabit their homelands because of access to clean drinking water and rising sea levels, but also to maintain their cultural traditions. So we'll be studying the effects of climate change on indigenous cultural practices and also improving water resilience. The stereotype of exploration has changed, but the opportunities for modern exploration are endless. But there's now a time pressure. These traditional voices, they're increasingly being silenced amid a whirlwind of conflict and globalization. And with every worldview that fades, every culture that disappears, no matter how seemingly remote or extraneous, so too does our repertoire of wisdom to the common challenges that face us all. I believe the next great age of exploration is just getting started, and I hope you guys will join me. So, I want to extend a huge thank you to Todd Ty, the whole Australia-New Zealand chapter, Balmoral Boathouse team. You guys are all awesome, and thank you for welcoming the lone American here. So, thank you guys.